I debated on. I thought about doing two sermons because you never. I mean, we're most of our young families attend the 11 o'clock service and talking about fatherhood and all that. And but I decided that it might be good for all of us because we are influencers of kids. Christina's doing a tremendous job in our children's ministry, and there's a lot of people that volunteer. And so I thought we'd just talk about fathering and mothering, and maybe maybe this will be good for you and informative, and maybe not. I don't know. You'll have to be the judge of that. I was thinking of experiences and stories, and Bev and I were talking. I'm going to invite her in the second service. Maybe we'll do this together. But we were talking about Sarah has 3 kids. Drake, who's about 5, Ronan, who is about 3, and Selma Rose, who is about 6 months old. Yeah, 6 months old. And Sarah has taught her kids that, if she wants them to do something and they're a little slow, she'll tell them once, and then she'll say, okay, I'm going to tell you to do this, and this is the second time, and they know on the third time that you know what that usually means. That there's going to be an application of motivation applied to the kids, which is usually a spanking. And so she said that the boys they have a room upstairs that's the toy room, and the boys had literally trashed this room. And they had toys everywhere, and they'd taken things and dumped them out, and it was a wreck. And so she had gone up. This was getting ready moving toward bedtime. And so she had gone up and said, boys, you need to put all this away. You need to clean it up, get this room ready, because you can't go to bed till this is all picked up. And she went back up after a while, and no progress. And so she went back downstairs, told him a second time, went back up the third time. And you know what that means. And Ronan finally said, he's the 3-year-old, he said, Mama, he said, just go ahead and spank me, because it's not worth having to clean up all this. I'd rather have the spanking. So he called her hand. That's a bad place to be as a parent, I was thinking about today and parenting, and I just looked up the top 20 scriptures related to parenting. And the first one, train up a child in the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not depart from it. We've all heard that. You've heard Ephesians 6:4, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. And we read those scriptures, and yet what does that mean? Train up a child in the way they should go, and they won't depart from it. That's great stuff, isn't it? But what in the world does that mean? How do you do that? I remember when Bev and I had gotten married, and we waited till just about all of our education was finished. In those days, you got married in college. Maybe some of you got married before, but kids don't hardly do that today. They get married later. But we got married, and we'd finished college and then graduate school. Bev got her master's, and I was my last semester of my Master's of Divinity degree. And so, we decided it was time, and so as we approached the birth of Scott, we started asking ourselves, well, what do these things mean? Instruct your children, train up your child, bring them up in the discipline and the instruction of the Lord. Some of that we knew. this is Psalms 127, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. And then on it goes. Fathers, again in Colossians it says the same thing as in Ephesians. And so the thing that got me started thinking about this was on the 20th celebration, the anniversary that you had in the second service. Trey Thompson was one of the panelists, and he said that Bev and I had taught a class on parenting, and he said some of those things just really stuck with him and spoke to he and Sarah. And I thought, well, maybe I need to talk about those in a broader context, like here. And so this is kind of my lessons on fatherhood and motherhood and parenting. And these are the things that we've learned. And the first thing that I would say to anybody that's a parent or a grandparent, and this is what we had to decide, is what is the goal of parenting? I mean, some parents, I ask that question, they say, well, I just want my kids to survive. I don't want them, and that's not a bad goal. We prayed this prayer for a long time over our kids and grandkids. Lord, watch over them and protect them, keep them. Put your Holy Spirit around them. And we even started praying when our kids were babies for their spouses. And the jury's still out about the answer to that prayer, I guess. But things are going pretty well. But what is the goal of parenting? This is what we learned that was extremely helpful. The first goal that we came to is we want to raise our kids up, to train our kids, so when they leave our influence, when they leave home, is they have the ability and the capacity and the knowledge to take responsibility for themselves. That they know how to navigate life. When they leave home, that they have the tools and the skills to be okay. And there's a lot of things that go into that when you're talking about parenting. And one of the things I think that we understood about that as we went to parenting classes and talked to mentors and read books and struggled with, now that we're having kids, what in the world are we going to do? The best model we had for that was our upbringing. That's the best model for marriage we have, that I tell people who are getting married in pre-marriage counseling is that's the reference point of how we were raised. And some of that's good, and maybe some of that's not so good. I ask couples, what from your family of origin do you want to bring into your family, your relationship, and what are the things that you don't want to bring in? And probably all of us have those things. But the goal is to teach them to take responsibility. And so that involves the ability to make decisions and to understand that life is full of consequences, isn't it? How do you teach a kid to make choices and then to understand there's consequences? I can remember Scott was in about the 8th grade, and we were living in South Carolina. And Bev and I decided to go out, and we had given Scott the opportunity to watch. We have 3 kids. Scott's the oldest, and then 2 girls, Sarah and Stephanie. And we'd given Scott the opportunity and the responsibility of watching the girls, babysitting the girls for the first time. And so we went out, and he agreed to do it. And I can't remember. We probably said we'd pay him to do it. And we pulled up to the house, and it was dark. I mean, it was pitch dark. And we opened the back door, and there was a utility room, and then there was another door that went into the kitchen, and we were walking in darkness, and that's before we had smartphones, so you couldn't flick on your LED flashlight, like we do now. And we were walking into the kitchen, we ran into this blanket that was covering the doorway into the kitchen. We thought, what in the world is going on? And we walked into the kitchen and then into the house, and they had covered all of the windows with blankets and quilts, and they'd turned the furniture upside down, and they had quilts. They'd built these forts in the house over the tables and chairs, and those kids were playing flashlight tag. They had flashlights, and they were chasing each other in the house. And if you got hit with a light, then I guess you were out. And we were talking about this morning, remembering these stories, and Bev remembers us. She remembers some of this better than I do. That we joined in with the kids as we started playing flashlight tag with them, and then after we played a few minutes, we turned on all the lights and we said, "Okay, now you guys know what happens. It's consequence time, and you made the decision to do this, and now part of the consequence is that you got to clean it up. Is you got to put everything back just like it was, put the quilts back." I don't think we punished them at that time for doing it, but we made them clean it up. I remember I got Scott a BB gun, and he'd hung paper plates on the clothesline in the backyard, and he had a friend over, and they'd put a bullseye on the paper plate, and they were using the paper plates for target practice. The problem was there's a lot of hills in South Carolina, and we were kind of down on a hill, and the neighbor's house was up, and so when he was shooting at the paper plate, he was shooting the windows out at the neighbor's bedroom, and pretty soon this irate neighbor calls, and so we go out and check, and so I took Scott with his BB gun, and we went to see the neighbor and talked to him about how he was going to replace the window that had been shot at. I mean, I could go on and on with stories of consequences, but we created boundaries for our kids. That we said, as long as you're within these boundaries, that life is good. And when you step outside these boundaries, we want you to know that we've given you the freedom to do that. And it's okay to step beyond the boundary. And we tell them this and we started this when they were real little. That these are boundaries, and you can do this or this. This is inside the boundary, and this is outside the boundary. And if you're inside the boundary, we're going to have fun. And if you step outside the boundary, what you need to understand is my role is to help you understand that there are consequences. And if you step outside the boundary, there's liable to be pain of some sort involved. We had it was Beverly's sorority paddle. You remember those days? And it hung on the wall in the kitchen, and most everything had 3 swats to it. You stay within the boundary, we'll have a party. You step outside the boundary, 3 swats. Sarah, our oldest daughter, she has a spoon, and she's got a face that's drawn on it with a frown, and she calls this spoon, kitchen spoon, Mr. Sad. And she says to her boys, you step outside this boundary, and we'll have to go get Mr. Sad. And so Bev and I never used our hands. We never disciplined in anger. My dad growing up, these are the things that you don't want to take from your family. Some things you do and some things you don't. I remember my dad we'd step outside the boundary and he would just explode. He had a temper. And I can remember when he undid that belt and jerked it out of his belt, the sound it would make when he was going through the belt loops, as it's coming through. And then it just kind of frail you, You remember those days? I was helping him plant wheat, and we had fertilizer in the back of the truck, and he was running the tractor on the drill, and so when the drill would get empty, I'd back up to the drill, and we'd scoop fertilizer, and I guess I probably had seed wheat in there too, and we'd fill the drill up, And he was on the other side of the field, and it was a terraced field to keep the water from eroding too much of the dirt off the field. And it was, let me just say to you, I think I was 12. I didn't have any video games, it was boring, you know what I'm saying? And so I decided that it would be fun to roll the truck up to the very top of the terrace and then push in on the clutch and see how far it'd roll back. And so I'd do it, and then I'd say, I wonder if I can get further this time than I got last time. I'd push it right up to the top of the terrace and push in on the clutch and let it roll back. And all of a sudden I looked out and I saw this tractor. This looked like those John Deere tractors had what they call road gear. And if you were moving a tractor from this place to the next place, you'd a lot of times put it down in road gear, which was a faster speed. And this tractor was coming across the field, and that drill was bouncing like this. And I thought, what is that knucklehead doing? And we had one tree in the field. It was an old elm tree, just one. And I saw him pull up to that tree, stopped, and then he got back on the tractor, and he raced toward that truck. He didn't say a word. He just opened the door, grabbed me out of that truck, and he had a elm limb switch, and he commenced to showing me about consequences. People go to prison for those kind of things today. Look what happened to Adrian Peterson. He lost his job just about over that. So those are the kind of things I didn't want to take into our parenting, but it was important that our kids understand that there's boundaries, and if you live with inside those boundaries, that the good things generally can happen to you. And if you step outside those boundaries, you suffer. You suffer, and that's true for us as adults, isn't it? I think I shared with you when this happened that I don't know exactly how it happened, but I pay the utility bills at the house. And I get a call from Bev, and she says, the lights won't come on. I said, you're kidding. So I go home, and sure enough, the lights won't come on. And I called the city, and I said, the lights won't come on. And they said, well, where's your address? And I gave them my address, and they said, well, you hadn't paid your electric bill. I said, you're kidding. And they said, no, we're not kidding. And I said, well, if I pay it right now on the phone, can you turn the lights on? And I gave them my credit card, and they had it turned on in about 30 minutes. But I'm going to tell you, I was in serious trouble. And the truth is that life is full of consequences, even for us adults. These lessons continue if we live within the parameters. And so when the scripture says, don't provoke your children to anger, I think the way we do that as parents is we don't become angry ourselves. And so part of the implication of, I think, being a healthy parent is being self-aware of yourself. And I think this goes beyond parenting. I think it goes into life, is knowing yourself and knowing what your tendencies are and being able to understand why you think or do or react in certain ways. And then deciding maybe that some things need to change, some things you need to lean into and increase in your life. I watch the three boys in our family. Scott is 38. Dan is in his earlier 30s, and Paul, our sons-in-law, Paul lives in Austin, and they are incredible fathers. I've just watched them, and they take time to engage with their kids. Scott works, he's an oncologist in Tulsa. He sometimes leaves at 6, gets up at 5:30 or so, and leaves 6 or 7. A lot of times goes to the hospital and makes rounds, and then goes to the clinic and sees people. And He works on Wednesdays in the office in Stillwater, and sometimes he doesn't get home till 8:30, and all three of the kids are waiting for him when he gets home. And he doesn't watch TV. He doesn't. When he walks in the door, it's this pandemonium. They just dogpile him, and he wrestles with them, and he helps them with homework, and all three of our boys, Scott, Dan, and Paul, they put their kids as top priority in their lives. I guess the final thing that I would say about these lessons of parenting is I think New Covenant has done a great job saying our kids are important to us. And I think what we've done in our focus is an expression that we want to invest in the children of our church and in this community. And I'm proud of what you've done and are doing, and all of those who volunteer in our children's ministry. Dads, we bless you today, and we thank God for who you are. If you haven't been the kind of dad, I mean, there's been times that I thought, because of the demands of church and work, and I felt a tinge of guilt that I couldn't be at every soccer game or every sports event. I tried to make most all of them, but there were times I couldn't, and there's always this feeling of guilt. And I remember as my kids became adults, is the things that kind of bothered me when they were growing up is they were never aware of. And it didn't bother them because what they remembered were the things that I did attend and the events that I did go to and the priority that they felt that I'd made for them. And so if you carry that around, that you weren't quite all that you felt like you should have been or wanted to be, maybe this morning is an opportunity to give that up and just understand that we do the best we can where we are with what we have, and we need to forgive ourselves sometimes and move on. There's communion at each corner of the worship center.